Hello everyone and welcome to part 2 of our twin hammers build. The tools needed are going to be some needle nose pliers, a hobby knife to cut out the parts back, Loctite included in the kit, CA for a quick tip on the nylon nuts, also a hex driver. This is awesome because it has all of our bits that we need there. Absolutely not necessary but cool to have is an electric screwdriver to kind of save your wrists and hands from being in the arm pump. I like to have an extra 5/64 in handy for when I'm using my 2mm wrench. And then included in the kit, the Vaterra has 2 size nut ends. We're going to use this when mounting the rear shock screws. We're going to start with our chassis here. And a quick tip, we actually like to grab a little bit of CA, we put a little bit inside the pocket where your actual nylon nut will sit into. Then I like to grab a 5/64 or any other appropriate tool with a small size shaft on it, and I can actually put the actual nylon nut and I can insert it like so, hold the nut, pull out the tool, and what this really does is it really helps not only for building the car, but if you ever need to disassemble this, it'll keep your nylon nuts from falling off into your electronics and stuff like that. So next we're going to install the lower link mounts, and these only go on there in one direction, so I'm just going to place those like so, and I'm going to start the install. So I'm going to go back and finish the job here, making sure all these are nice and snug. And we're going to move on to our upper link mounts. One thing to pay attention on the upper link mount is, in the center you're going to actually find a letter that corresponds to the orientation. That letter is found here. The right will obviously be your passenger side, and the left will be the driver's side. So I'm going to flip the chassis over and install these like so, paying close attention that the opening is towards the back, obviously to leave room for the upper link. So now that those are there, I'm going to grab my electric screwdriver and get all these started. So I'm going to finish getting these nice and snug with the appropriate tool, and there is your finished product. And the bottom side with both your upper and lower links, like so. Now we're going to move on to the rear upper shock mounts. I have my screws segregated here. Just double check my lengths. And a big thing to notice here is the actual orientation of this hole. This needs to be pointing towards the outside of the vehicle because this will be used for the battery brace later. So, paying attention to my orientation, I'm going to set that in like so. I'm going to prepare my electric screwdriver here and get ready to screw this into place. Quick tip, guys, when you guys are installing the rear upper shock mounts, it is best to put the actual screw through the tower first with the nut. It's a little bit harder to get into this area once you install both of the towers. So I'm going to go ahead and install the screw now. There's a handy Vaterra tool that comes with the kit. I'm going to snug this up. There it is. And obviously when you do the other side, in order to prevent kind of the interference of the already installed rear shock tower, I'm going to install the screw first on this side. And again, paying close attention to the orientation, making sure that the cutout for the flathead screw is facing the outside of the vehicle. So I'm going to grab my screwdriver here. I'm holding onto the nut and going to screw this in. There you go. Grab my 2mm 5/64 wrench here, get this snug. Once I get all this buttoned up, then I can go ahead and install it. and I don't have to worry about the interference of installing these screws later. So I'm going to get these all buttoned up nice and snug here, and there's your finished product. Now we have that all completed, we can move on to the servo. I decided to use a S6270 Spectrum servo. It's awesome because it's a shorty, so it leaves more room for your electronics in your receiver later on. It is metal gear, and it also has a cool little different size lead so we can throw on this. So awesome servo, check them out. Shorty always helps, gives you more room. Let's go ahead and get this installed. So one thing to note is obviously we do give you the 23, 24, and 25 spline servo inserts. Their numbers are clearly labeled on the back side of them. So I'm going to get the appropriate Spectrum spline. I'm going to install that. And one quick note is to always try to center the servo first before installation. Got to get this close, and then we'll kind of sub-trim it out after the build. So I'm going to go full right, full left, kind of readjust it. That's about, yep, so I get full travel, full right, full left. So that means that's going to be close to center. Again, full right, full left. I'm going to go right to about center, like so. Now I know that that is set. And get the appropriate, little bit of a personal tip here, guys. When I install my servo horn, I usually do not put any Loctite. This is metal on metal, but some people tend to overdo it on Loctite, and then it makes getting this off a lot harder in the end. The screw doesn't really see a whole lot of load once it's tightened, so no Loctite is okay. Now that that's secure, I'm going to go ahead and do the ball end with the appropriate nut using the same CA method. And one thing to note, I already want to go ahead and install the left side servo mount, and it's always important to leave these loose. Again, I'm going to put a little dab of CA and then insert the nylon nut. And again, this will kind of just prevent the nut from falling out whenever I need to take apart, replace the servo, maintenance it, whatever I need to do. Saves you some time on the trail. And it's important that before you move on to the right side of the servo, we need to insert the actual lead. So here's a lead. These come in different sizes. You can buy separately depending on your application. And then another thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and install the nut first. Again, this is just because I'm running a shorty servo. Usually this isn't needed on a standard size servo. So I'm going to go ahead and press this in, like so. Once I get that pressed in, then I can install my lead, paying close attention to the orientation. There's a small little tooth, if you will, that goes on the bottom side, like so. It could only go in one way, but obviously you could jam it in, so just pay close attention. And now we can go ahead and install the right side servo mount. So it's important again, guys, to leave these loose, and I will show you guys why right now. Here's a completed servo. The reason you want to leave those loose is because sometimes if you over tighten those, they actually won't seat well in the chassis. So I leave those nice and loose. The chassis actually has small little keys where those will kind of work themselves into the correct position. I hold it snugly, and then I go in with my appropriate 2mm 5/64" MAP wrench, and I get these tightened up. You won't be able to tighten up the lower one on the left-hand side of the servo, but that's okay. We can move on to the right side servo mount, get these nice and snug. And once I complete this, I'll go and make sure not to miss the bottom one that you can't reach. And now you're confident that the actual servo mount, the angles of those servo mounts are in the right, correct position, so you won't have any type of interference issues going onto the chassis. So with that, throw that on there, and I'll mount my servo. Big part of the build here is installing, you guessed it, part 1 video, transmission. We already obviously went ahead and installed our 10 scale size servo along with our Tegan 8.5 sensor system. And one thing to pay attention here when you guys are installing the transmission, guys, is these two pockets here will actually be used for this portion of the front mount. And you also want to make sure your rear drive shaft goes through the rear of the chassis like so. Get the servo lead out of the way, and I will kind of set these into the pocket. You'll kind of feel a good little snap, and bam. So then I can snugly hold my assembly there, and I already have my screws separated by proper length following the instructions, and I will begin the install. So congratulations guys on getting to step B5. I think this is a cool time to check everything out. It's really cool to kind of see everything coming together. And B6 is actually installing your ESC and your receiver in this area, and I'm actually going to hold off on that till we have a little bit more of the vehicle assembled, so I can kind of figure out my wiring. So I'm going to go ahead and continue forward onto step B7, open up the parts bag, and we're going to start off by building the sway bar links. I'm going to kind of organize my parts here, open up my screw bag, get all these out. And a quick tip for when building your actual sway bar links is the actual longer set screws are obviously for your sway bar links. They have a hex feature on the end of them. It makes this really easy and convenient because then you can just grab your appropriate hex tip, install it onto your screwdriver or your hex wrench, whichever you're using. And I like to, by hand, just kind of start it, you know, maybe half full turn, and then I grab my pliers, kind of securely hold on to this, and I like to kind of, on a slow speed, kind of go all the way in, all the way out, and all the way back in one more time. And you want to do this for all 4 of the ball ends. This will make it a lot easier to install by hand, make it a lot easier on your fingers. So now we have those all pre-threaded, and now it'll be much easier to go in here and thread these on by hand. It definitely wouldn't be this easy if it wasn't for the pre-threading of the ball end. And we're going to kind of keep that to the size per the manual. And again, you can change these later on, guys. We'll actually make a video once the vehicle's done to kind of show you guys how to adjust these. So I'm going to check both of them. Both are very similar in length. And I'm going to set those aside and continue on with B8. So now I'm going to simply install smaller set screws on the sway bar holders. And a quick tip here is always use Loctite. Again, metal on metal with thread usually takes Loctite, guys. And I'm going to install that on my ball end. Kind of get that started just so it makes it a little bit easier. Once those are on there, we can move on to the rear sway bar. So the car comes with 3 sway bars, thick, medium, and thin. And really, your thick one is what I'm going to go ahead and use. A thicker rear sway bar is more for a high-speed application. It's going to reduce torque twist. It's going to allow less articulation, so it is going to stay flatter through the corners, low speed and high speed. So that's why I'm going to use this, since I am majorly going to be bashing this vehicle high speed with very minor crawling. A medium sway bar is going to give you the best of both worlds. It's going to be great for medium to high speed driving, but you are going to be doing some level of slow articulation crawling. Again, it's going to give you a little more torque twist, but with the torque twist, that means that it's allowing the rear suspension to articulate a little bit more, so you are going to get a little bit better performance when it comes to rock crawling. And lastly is the super thin sway bar. This is definitely more oriented to majority of rock crawling. It's going to give you the most articulation out of all the sway bars, but it's probably going to be the least efficient when it comes to high speed racing environments, whether that's super high speed corners, small 180s, things like that. Now the other option, guys, is of course to run no sway bar. I would run a no sway bar option if I am strictly going to be crawling this vehicle and probably top speed of anywhere from 15-20 miles an hour. It is probably going to give you the best performance on the rocks when it comes to crawling. But just note that that is an option. You guys could skip this step, and again, feel free to play with these things, guys. It's kind of the fun part about the hobby, is just kind of tuning your vehicle for your driving style. So I'm going to go ahead and start installing the ball ends. Quick tip on this is when you tighten these set screws, tighten them so that they are actually at level with the sway bar. This will make the set screw easily accessible when it's actually mounted on the vehicle. If you mount them up, it's sometimes a little harder and trickier to get in there. So I'm going to mount them so that the whole sway bar and the screw and everything are in a level plane. And then you can go ahead and prepare your screws for your sway bar holders and begin the install per the manual. So once you get this installed, you want to make sure you have clear, smooth movement, guys. And again, like for example, if I'm holding pressure on one end and I push with the other, again, it's going to put pressure on my other finger. You can simulate this as a suspension where as a vehicle starts to roll, it's going to actually keep the rear end level. So again, this is great for racing, but not so good for the rock. So depending on your applications, go ahead and choose whether it's the thin, medium, or thick sway bar. Now I'm going to go ahead and pop in my rod assembly into the ball end using those pliers. Get a little grip here and snap that in, and again with the other side. Next, we're going to move on to the final step, the battery tray. This battery tray accepts the 18 scale size 2S packs there, or the Dynamite Shorty pack there. You need a little bit more performance. So we're going to go ahead and start the install on this using the supplied hardware and following the manual instructions. Now I do want to point out when you install this, you want to leave some room for it to actually move around, because you will need to move this around when we install the cage later. So there you go, guys. The last and final step is your battery strap. So this is included in the kit. You can run them in two different configurations. First, I'm going to show you guys how to configure it for more of the 18 scale size 2-cell packs. Vaterra logo facing up underneath the body. You essentially just tighten up once the battery's in there, and Velcro holds it in place. I am going to be using the Dynamite Shorty pack, a little bit better performance. And so I am going to install in the other configuration, again with the Vaterra logo facing up. I'm going to feed that through the actual loophole there, under and up the other side, and straight through there, and boom, Velcro. So this is how I'm going to leave my configuration. There you go, guys. Completed step B of the manual. Give you guys a quick look here. Driver's side, the passenger side, the bottom side of the chassis, again with all the links and everything installed. So I think that's it, guys. Thanks so much for checking us out. We'll see you guys for part 3. Later.